What's up, everyone? Brian here from Ride Your Money Wave. Today I want to talk to you about my 5 worst financial decisions. Now, when I talk to people about money, they oftentimes think that either I'm lucky, I'm incredibly smart, that I was born with some sort of rich gene, and none of this is the truth. In fact, I have made plenty of financial mistakes. But by making those mistakes, I analyzed the patterns of what I felt and what I thought both before and after that decision, and I started to realize that there was a pattern. And that's how I developed my 5 rules of money that I now follow to control my emotions and therefore make better financial decisions. So let's get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way right now. First, if you haven't already, hit that like button on this video. It helps me grow my audience and spread the word of good financial stewardship. Also consider subscribing and perhaps even sharing this information with your friends. Secondly, if you haven't watched the 5 rules of money video, you should probably do that. This is like the cornerstone of how I've acquired my financial wealth. And spoiler alert, it deals more with emotional behavior than it does with actual financial intellect. If you can control your emotions, you can control your money, and you become the master of money rather than money mastering you. And that is a big, big difference. I can't emphasize enough the importance of memorizing, analyzing, and implementing these 5 rules of money in your life. This has been a game changer for me. All right, having said that, let's take a look at the 5 financial decisions that were mistakes in my life. The very first financial decision that was a big mistake occurred right around the age of 30, and that is this guy right here. So, I was 30 years old, and I was influenced by my peers. My cousins who were successful had nice watches. My friend had a really nice watch, and I mean, plain and simple, my ego got in the way. You know, I had rental properties, I was maxing out my financial accounts, my retirement accounts. I had hit my main goal of having $100,000 in my retirement account by the age of 30. And here I was, my business was growing, I was working hard, and I said, you know what? I want something that every time I look down at it, I am reminded of my success. Well, this watch led to several other watches, and in total, I probably spent close to $6,000, I would guess, on maybe 4 different watches, this one being the most expensive and costing $3,000. Now here is the irony, okay? I'm gonna be very vulnerable and transparent here. When I bought this watch, I was hoping people would notice. I had an inflated ego. I wanted to impress people, and that is totally lame and pathetic looking back at it. And the best part about this was that of all the weddings that I shot and all the weddings that I wore this to, all the public events, only 2 people ever noticed the watch. This watch cost $3,000. I thought that it would turn heads, okay? And my favorite part looking back is that at the time, my friend Eric, who accompanied me on all of my weddings, he had a watch that cost $18 from eBay. And it had 3 different heads on it, 3 different faces on it that told different times. He always got compliments on that watch. And I remember eating dinner one time at Meadowbrook Hall with him, and someone came up and talked to him and complimented on his watch. And I just sat there and we exchanged this look, and he was polite enough to not make fun of me, but we both knew what I was thinking. And so I bought this watch based on ego. It has only lost value, and it tells time just as good as a $50 watch. So, one of my worst financial mistakes, it's not that big of a deal because maybe the resale value on this is $1,200, so I'm out $1,800. But it was a lesson learned. Don't let your ego get in the way. My second worst financial decision is buying a new car. Now, it is a very debated question whether it's better to lease or to buy. And who knows, maybe I'll do a video on this. But why was buying a new car a bad financial decision for me? Because I literally drove to the dealership, turned in my lease truck, and had no way home. I mean, that's just pure stupidity. I had researched buying a Ford Focus and totally decked out. And when I got there, the gentleman said, hey, you know, for the same amount of money, you should actually look at this Fusion. You get more car, it's a bigger car, more comfortable, etc. And so that's what I walked off the lot with. I bought a 2006 Ford Fusion, brand new. Now, looking back at it, it wasn't exactly a terrible purchase because I have a rule. And that rule is always position yourself on the winning side of a transaction. I've used this rule multiple times, which you'll actually see in my next financial mistake. But even if it starts off as a bad transaction, sometimes there's different ways to position yourself in order to make it be beneficial to you. And that's what I did with this car. Ideally, what I would have done is bought a used 3-year-old car with very low miles. Why? Because it takes a large portion of its depreciation up front, but it still has a lot of its life left. But instead, my ego got in the way and I bought a new car because I had just got a raise at work. I went from working in private school to public school, and I received a little bit of a pay bump. And so what I did is, even though that wasn't the greatest decision, I drove that car for 9 years. I ended up selling that car right around 128,000 miles simply because I needed more room to bring my photography gear and to drive my guests around. Originally, it wasn't the best decision, but I turned it into a good one by not letting my ego get in the way for the second time. And I drove that thing for 9 years, and I had a 0% APR loan on it for 5 years. And then afterwards, I had no payment. And all that extra money I saved for the next car, or I invested it. My third worst financial decision again deals with cars, and that is I bought a 1937 Dodge D5 sedan. This thing was sexy. Oh, I still love that car. I don't have it anymore, but I bought it with the profits from a year's worth of photography. And the photography business was relatively slow. I had a good number of open weekends, and so I wanted to create another business to try to make money when I wasn't making money. And so I bought an antique car thinking that I would create a chauffeur service and I would drive brides and grooms around on their wedding day and have them be photographed in front of the car and photographed in style. Great idea. There was just one problem with it. I am not a mechanic. I'm terrible with my hands. And so once that engine started to, falter a little bit, I had no idea how to fix it. And that meant that if I hired someone, my profits were going to be going down. I bought that car, sat on it for 3 years, and turned around and sold it. I pretty much broke even, if I remember correctly. So it really wasn't an economic loss, but there were 2 lessons that I learned from that. The first was that I lost out on my opportunity cost. That is, the money that was tied up in the business in that car could have been invested and made money passively. 3 years in the stock market during the last bull run, I definitely would have made money on that. The second thing came from my cousin Matt. He came over to look at the car, and I was all excited. I backed it out of the garage, put it in the sunlight, right? And he's kind of looking at it, and we have different levels of excitement. And he came in the house and he said, Brian, let me ask you something. Why are you doing this? And I'm like, Matt, to make money. And I'll always remember, he points at my laptop and he said, Brian, that is a money printing machine. You know exactly how to use it. Why don't you focus on that? And what he was referring to was my photography business. And he was right. I should have stayed in my lane and focused on the market that I knew exactly how it worked and exactly how to make money. I was an absolute fool. My ego got in the way. I thought having an antique car made me special. I thought having an antique car would turn heads. My ego got in the way. And so I sold it and I focused back on photography, and that is when my business really started to grow. My fourth financial mistake was my first house. My ego got in the way yet again. At the time, housing prices were going up faster than my wages. And so I felt this urge, this rush, this panic that if I didn't buy a house now, I wouldn't ever be able to afford a house. And so I put 10% down on a tiny little house that I fell in love with. I paid $136,000 for it. Fast forward, the bubble burst. That house, 15 years later, is only worth about $100,000. I have literally lost $36,000 worth of equity even while continuing to make mortgage payments on this thing. Okay, disaster. But like I said earlier in the video, always make sure that you are on the winning side of a transaction. What I did is I turned that house into a rental. And that was my first rental. I didn't go into it planning on becoming a landlord, but I became one when I got a new job on the east side of the state. So I moved back in with my parents. I swallowed my pride. I lived with them for 2.5 years while I saved up for a down payment on a next house. And I kept that house because I didn't want to stomach writing a check to the bank in order to sell the house. And so now the house is cash flow positive, but I have lost equity on it. I've had to put money into it. I had to put a new roof on. I put a new hot water heater into it. It needs a new furnace. It needs another hot water heater. Making money in real estate is tough. That's one of the main questions that I get, is that people are really interested in real estate. Real estate right now is sexy, right? You've got Chip and Joanna Gaines making flips look easy. You've got everyone thinking that they're an interior designer. Real estate is kind of trendy right now. And I think that it's harder than it looks. At least that's been my experience. Overall, if I look at it, I've probably broken even on that purchase. But every year, it's some sort of unexpected cost. It's some sort of unexpected headache. And I know that I make more money if I dedicate my time to my business than to my real estate. So I'll call it a negative. My fifth worst financial mistake was trying to pick individual stocks. Now, in full disclosure, I still own individual stocks, but my approach to these stocks has evolved over the years. I used to read headlines. I would say, yeah, that really makes sense, and I would go out and I would buy that stock. Well, guess what? That news, that information is already priced into the stock price. And so a few times I bought companies reading just one headline, just reading one financial article. Oh my God, it's embarrassing to even say. I know that if this ever blows up, I will certainly get brutally made fun of. But it's the truth. And I'm trying to put it out there so you don't make the same mistake. So I was trying to trade, not trying to invest. Now, as an investor, I am okay with the market volatility. I'm okay with the fluctuations in price. I believe in the investing thesis. I look at the numbers, and I am willing to hold that company for 10, 20, 30 years, or until the market structure changes. So now when I'm buying individual stocks, I do not plan on selling them anytime soon. When I was buying individual stocks, when I made bad decisions, this was when I didn't do my research and I was buying more as a trade on speculation than I was buying for the long term. So in total, I've lost some money on that, but luckily they were small positions and it was lessons learned. So there you have it, guys. Those are my 5 worst financial decisions. And if you notice, what do they all have in common? My ego getting in the way. If you memorize my 5 rules of money and you apply them to your life, I really think that you will avoid making bad financial decisions and you'll have a healthier relationship with your money. And when you have a healthy relationship with your money, you control your money as opposed to your money controlling you. And once you do that, you are on the road to financial independence and financial freedom. So, till next time, guys, take this information, implement it into your life, and go out there and go live your best life.